The NBA is home to some of the richest athletes in the entire world. The insane contracts that stars sign and their lucrative brand deals give players enough money to last generations. And while many players take advantage of the gifts they're given, time and time again we see players spend all of their money on useless things, get caught in bad investments, and watch all of their hard-earned money slip right through their fingers. So without further ado, let's look into both sides of the spectrum and look at some of the richest and some of the poorest NBA players of all time. And what better way to start us off than by talking about one of the greatest to ever do it, Michael Jordan. MJ had one of the best basketball careers you could possibly have, winning 6 NBA titles and becoming arguably the greatest player to ever play in the NBA. But after he left the league, he found heaps of success. Over the course of his career, he only made a little bit more than $90 million, which would be mere morsels compared to what he could make in today's game. But his financial empire all started when he signed with Nike in 1985 for a base of $500,000 annually. But now, he's building up hundreds of millions of dollars accumulated from the Jordan brand deal. In 2023 alone, it was reported that he made around $330 million. But that's not all. He has earned millions from deals with Wheaties, Coke, McDonald's, and many other brands as well. And of course, you can't forget that MJ used to be the owner of the Charlotte Hornets as well, after buying it in February of 2010. His original payment for the team was $275 million, but when he sold it in 2023, he did it for $3 billion. So you could say that his return on investment was pretty damn good. And last but certainly not least, we have to talk about his NASCAR team, 23XI Racing, that he owns alongside driver Danny Hamlin, and it should come to no surprise that his team has garnered some success, including a Cup Series regular season championship via Tyler Reddick. Over all of these endeavors, MJ has a net worth of around $3.5 billion, the most of any athlete all time. And while there are stories like MJ's, there are certainly those of defeat and distress, and Delonte West's story is one of those. Delonte West was a role player in the NBA, earning somewhere near $16 million over the course of his career. He played alongside a young LeBron James and had a starting spot in the league for a few years, but when he got out of the NBA, he just couldn't hold it together. During his teenage years, he struggled with addiction, and in 2008, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. In 2009, he was pulled over for a traffic violation, but after finding multiple guns on his person, he was arrested. The following year, he would divorce his first wife, and by then, fees were racking up. But by that time, he had already bought his parents a house, put his sister through college, and was just handing out money to those who needed it. But when the time came for him to use his money, there just wasn't any. And in his final NBA season, he would have to resort to sleeping in his car because he simply couldn't afford an apartment. After his time in the NBA, he would struggle to make ends meet, playing overseas and racking up as much money as he possibly could. But it just wasn't enough, and when he was finally done playing basketball, he went completely off the rails. In 2016, he was spotted homeless and panhandling in Maryland. Of course, he denied the rumors, but the basketball world was in shock. One of their own was homeless, but it just got worse. In 2020, he was found on the streets again. Owners, players, and pretty much the entire sports world came together, and it was tragic. But he still couldn't get back on his feet, and he has been arrested in Fairfax County, Virginia on multiple occasions in the last few years. His situation is a reminder that the financial success the NBA brings can be fleeting, and that if you aren't careful, you can end up in a really sticky situation. But let's swing it back to the other side of things and look at the other guy that many consider as the GOAT, LeBron James. Unlike MJ, LeBron has made hundreds of millions of dollars over the years just on contracts alone. And after his 24-25 salary, he has surpassed $500 million in career earnings. But unlike many players who wait until they have retired to make savvy investments, LeBron has gotten started with it early and has made a fortune both on and off the court. It would take forever to talk about everything that LeBron got himself into, so let's just hit a few of the major ventures. First off, there are the brand deals that he's made. LeBron's had a long relationship with Nike with 22 signature shoes, and like Jordan, he has made somewhere near $1 billion, with most of it coming after signing a lifetime contract with them in 2015. He has also been the face of Coca-Cola, Beats by Dre, and AT&T, and countless other companies. And then there is his Spring Hill company, which was founded by James and his business partner Maverick Carter. James had gotten himself involved in some sports organizations as well. Alongside Drake, LeBron became a part owner of the football club AC Milan in 2022, and he's also a part owner of the NHL team, the Pittsburgh Penguins. He also joined as a partner on the Fenway Sports Group in 2021, which owns the Boston Red Sox, Liverpool, Fenway Park, and many other sports entities. He has created one of the most outstanding resumes on the court, but he has done the same away from it. From multi-million-dollar mansions to sports club ownership, you could say he has done pretty well for himself. But unlike LeBron, former player Antoine Walker has shown how quickly money can disappear. Over his career, the former All-Star made over $100 million. With that kind of money, you'd think that you would be set up for life. But Walker wasn't exactly thinking that way. After leaving the league, the legal issues started piling up. After getting arrested for driving under the influence, Walker would be caught using bad checks to try to cover his gambling losses. The charges were around $800,000. He didn't go to prison, but in 2010 he filed for bankruptcy with a 3-to-1 debts to asset ratio. He was in pretty big trouble. But how did he get to this point? First off, like West, he was always generous with his money and probably a little bit too much. He also tried to make smart investments, but they were all ill-advised. But with the rest of his money, like with gambling, he was not smart. Expensive cars, lavish houses, and his constant drive to one-up those around him ultimately caused his downfall. But since going bankrupt, he has turned things around. He has set up guidelines to help current athletes stay afloat, and he has become an example of financial literacy. But let's look at another icon in Magic Johnson, whose net worth sits around $1.6 billion. Like Jordan, Magic didn't make the bulk of his money in the league. The prolific passer and franchise cornerstone led a Lakers dynasty during his time with the franchise, but after retirement, he created a generational dynasty of wealth. Post-retirement, he founded Magic Johnson Enterprises, which is now worth over $1 billion. But apart from his conglomerate, he has invested in various other ventures, including real estate, technology, and various sports organizations. But let's focus on the sports franchise that he has become involved with. From the 1990s to 2010, Johnson owned a minority stake in the Los Angeles Lakers. But just because he sold his stake in that team didn't mean that he wasn't going to get involved in others. Currently, he holds a minority ownership in many LA-based teams like the Dodgers, the Sparks, and LAFC. But outside the city, he also owns a part of the Washington Commanders and the Washington Spirit. But beyond sports, he strives to make an impact in various other endeavors. He is deeply rooted in the technology and media industry and has a constantly growing investment empire. And now, let's look at the 4-time All-Star Vin Baker and his financial downfall. Over his 13-year career, Baker made a light $100 million. He was a skilled big man in his prime and held it down for the Bucks in the 90s. But despite all of that success, he found a way to mess it all up after he fell into alcoholism. In 2007, he was arrested for drunk driving outside of a casino, but it didn't start there. Boston Celtics coach Jim O'Brien had to suspend Barker after smelling alcohol on his breath during practice. Additionally, he had built a very serious gambling addiction, which went as far as losing as much as $1 million in a single night. Yeah, he pretty much just needed help. He had fallen victim to extravagant spending, bad deals, and faulty advisors. In fact, he went as far as to file a lawsuit for a prejudgment remedy of $12 million against his former financial advisors who, according to him, advanced their own interests to the detriment of mine. After his downfall, Baker was able to get himself back up on his feet. First, he worked at a Starbucks to give himself a set schedule, but after years of work, he was able to get himself a spot on the Milwaukee Bucks coaching staff, where he still is today. And now to possibly the most dominant center of all time, let's have a look at Shaquille O'Neal and his empire of brand deals and investments. After being drafted with the first overall pick in the 1992 draft, Shaq went on to have a storied career with 15 All-Star appearances, an MVP reward, and 4 titles. But unlike many players who solely splurged on their earnings, O'Neal came in with a more strategic approach to handle his $286 million in career earnings. He chose to create a diverse profile of investments and brand deals, some so bizarre that they're laughable. He owns car washes, health clubs, and much more. His endorsement deals are expansive as well. He's partnered with Reebok, Icy Hot, Pepsi, and General Insurance most famously, although there are many companies that have chosen Shaq as their guy. And of course, you can't forget about his shoe line, which he created specifically for those who couldn't afford the typical basketball shoe. Most of his financial endeavors have been wildly successful, and why he has a net worth of around $500 million. Shaq is pretty much the blueprint for financial success. Not only has he done so well, but because he's so well known and has fun doing what he does. He can be seen DJing on TV or in the most random place you can think of. That's pretty much just Shaq. But next is a guy who just couldn't hold it together, both on and off the court. Latrell Sprewell is wildly known as one of the biggest crash outs in NBA history, choking out his coach, PJ Carlismo, and stupid financial decisions such as turning down a $21 million contract because he needed to feed his family was the start of it all. By the time he was out of the league, he wasn't necessarily bad. I mean, he was still a starter, but despite a fairly successful 13-year career, which earned him over $100 million, there were signs of bad financial planning after his exit from the league. In 2007, his $1.5 million yacht was repossessed. A couple years later, a New York estate of his foreclosed, and then in 2011, the last straw fell when he owed the state of Wisconsin $3.5 million in unpaid taxes. In the end, Sprewell just couldn't keep it together. The former All-Star now works in community relations for the Knicks and in media relations for Madison Square Garden, where he will forever be haunted by the opportunities lost after his disastrous post-career financial struggles. Now back to another current star in Kevin Durant, who has made the most of his money earned over the course of his career. Since getting drafted in 2007, KD made almost $450 million through his lucrative contract with the Nets, Suns, Warriors, and Thunder. But a key factor to his success with the money he's earned is his smart approaches to investments. While living in multi-million-dollar properties, he found companies that fit him, including Nike, who signed him to a lifetime contract, kind of like they did with LeBron. He has become a serious financial advisor as well. Through his company 35 Ventures and alongside his business partner Rich Kleeman, Durant has invested in AI, tech, wellness, and media. And like many other players do, he found his way into other sports. He recently bought a minority stake in PSG, he owns part of an MLS team, and he has become a co-owner of a pickleball team. But he isn't done. Both on and off the court, he is getting older, but he can still hoop with the best of them. By the time he retires, he will already set himself and his entire bloodline for a lifetime of success. Now, Joe Smith is seen as one of the biggest busts out of first overall picks, as he never made an All-Star game and settled in mediocrity. But with being selected with the first overall pick, there are some prior conceptions. You have to look the part, and that means spending a lot of money, and money that he just didn't have. While this normally works out for the top picks, because a lot of them make hundreds of millions throughout the course of their career nowadays, that wasn't the case for Smith, who made $61 million over his 16-year career. When talking about his mistakes, he first talked about taxes, which is something that players with poor financial education often forget about. And you can't forget about all the fees from your agents and managers. So when you take all that into account, Smith revealed that he made somewhere around $18 million over the course of his career, but he could have made much more. See, in his career, Smith was caught having under-the-table deals with the Timberwolves after signing some pretty suspect low contracts. He had to give up money and lost out on what he says was about $86 million at the end of the day. Just crushing. And then once he left the league, he lost even more after a rough divorce. By that time, Smith was racking up debts that he just couldn't pay. If he would have had a first pick type of career and made more money, maybe we would be telling a different story today. But that just isn't the case. But next we have Steph Curry. And like LeBron and KD, Steph's wealth is apparent. He has one of the most successful careers in point guard history and has cashed in on it. His contracts are pretty remarkable. First, he signed a $201 million deal in 2017, and then a $215 million extension in 2021, and a $62 million veteran extension for the next season. But when he's not drilling threes and wrecking opponents, he takes care of his money. First off, he has a deal with Under Armour, which earns him millions yearly and will for the rest of his life. But then there are his investments. There are brand deals, but most impressively is his company, SC30 or 30 Inc. Through his company, he has created basketball academies, media companies to focus on sports, and even his own brand of whiskey. I mean, it's pretty hard to get better than that. All in all, his net worth is just under $250 million. Himself, his brother Seth, and his father Del have created a family dynasty in the NBA, But Steph doesn't want to just keep that on the court, as we have seen with the work he has done. And unlike many players who lost their fortunes, Allen Iverson actually made a whopping amount of money through his years in the league, with the number at over $200 million if you take into account his Reebok brand deal. But his downfall with all the money was with the lifestyle that he tried to lead. He traveled in the most expensive cars and the fanciest clothes and covered expenses for his whole posse. Unlike most players nowadays, Iverson wasn't looking into the future, he just wanted to have a good time. And that he did until he financially couldn't do it anymore. And of course, there were some legal issues as well. But through his time in the NBA, Giannis Antetokounmpo had transformed from a relatively unknown prospect to who we now know as the Greek Freak. With career earnings at nearly $300 million, with who knows how much more to come, Giannis has created peak financial success. Like pretty much any relevant player nowadays, Giannis has a shoe deal with Nike that evolved into his signature shoe deal worth millions and millions. He also has been in various brand deals, which also earns him millions. But what sets him apart from the everyday millionaire is that he's very humble about it. You don't see Giannis bragging about his wealth everywhere he goes. He's conservative with the money that he has, and it will probably end up paying off in the long run for both himself and his family. In fact, when he first came to the States, he opened accounts at half a dozen banks so that he could keep his money safe. But even with all of this, you can still find Giannis spending his money if you look hard enough. He has bought into Nashville SC, along with his brothers, the Milwaukee Brewers, and made a six-figure investment into Ready Nutrition, a sports drink competitor to Coke and Pepsi. With these investments and lucrative deals, who knows how rich Giannis can become? I mean, he still is only 30 years old. But now let's shift to Larry Johnson, who ran into some troubles over the course of his career. He started his career off hot, winning Rookie of the Year after getting drafted first overall and getting his way into some All-Star games, and he would earn tens of millions of dollars in his prime, but his prime was unfortunately cut short after some injuries hit him hard. Post-retirement is where his financial situation really became complicated. Like many of his former colleagues, Johnson just couldn't hold his wealth together. Debts that he had piled up over the years and were finally catching up to him. And of course, there was a spending that happened during his career. As the first overall pick, Johnson also must have felt the need to spend money. After all, most players want to look like they've been there before, even if they hadn't. But after that money ran short because of injuries, Johnson was looking at child support payments that he couldn't pay and had to file for bankruptcy in 2015 after coming up short $120,000. In the process, he had to give up his home in California. Johnson's story is disheartening, but it is a warning sign of the traps that players fall into, even in today's game. But for our last successful star, we're going to take a look at the Beard, James Harden. The current Clippers star has set himself apart with the rest of the league with his strategic contract negotiations and interesting business ventures. Having earned up to $400 million at this point in time in salaries alone, Harden built a strong foundation, but he wasn't going to stop there. First, there's his shoe deal with Adidas worth about $200 million over 13 years, so pretty much a second NBA salary. And then there are his additional endorsements from Body Armor to Beats to State Farm. But besides the traditional investments for athletes like sports teams, some of which he still owns by the way, he has created his own lines of products. He has the J. Harden wines and even his own fragrance line. With how many teams he's played for and how many fans he's picked up, he has definitely done well in the marketing regard. With a net worth greater than $150 million, Harden has created generational wealth. He continues to balance his basketball career with his investments and products, and he has done everything to set himself up for success. And lastly, we're gonna have to take a look at Kenny Anderson, a former journeyman point guard who spent time with many different teams over his 14-year career. But with millions in his career earnings and a long career, how did things end up going wrong? Well, you could point out a few different things. First off, he had the struggles of saying no that many players go through. The fact that he had 7 children and 2 failed marriages doesn't really help with that either. Child support bills piled up and Kenny couldn't pay them. It was crippling. And so in 2005, Anderson declared bankruptcy. But then there were some legal issues. After finding a stable enough job as a basketball coach, he would be fired after getting charged with a DUI. He just couldn't stay on his feet. And since then, he has done quite all right and has done his best to warn players about the dangers of spending and mismanaging, but he will forever go down in history books as one of those guys who just simply lost it all. Financial stability is so important for everyone, but there will always be problems no matter how much money you are given. These have been some of the richest and poorest players in NBA history. Thanks for watching Affluence, and subscribe if you enjoyed.